Hey, history buffs, and people who accidentally clicked on this. Let's talk Sumerians. Picture Mesopotamia, roughly 4500 BCE. It's hot, it's dusty, and it's about to become the hottest spot for civilization since, well, ever. Why Mesopotamia? Think of it as the Silicon Valley of the ancient world. Two rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, meant fertile land, which was great for agriculture. And who doesn't love a good agricultural boom? Spoiler, it's the Sumerians. They were all about that farm life. This fertile land attracted people like free Wi-Fi attracts, well, everyone. And with more people came the need for organization, innovation, and probably a really good conflict resolution app. Enter the Sumerians. They saw an opportunity and they seized it, much like that guy who bought the domain name pets.com in the 90s. Too soon? So, the Sumerians are settling in, building houses, planting crops, the usual. But how do you keep track of all that stuff? Mental notes? Carrier pigeons? Nope, too messy. The Sumerians invented writing. Not just any writing, mind you, but cuneiform wedge-shaped marks on clay tablets. Now, let's be real, cuneiform doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. It wasn't exactly Twitter, but it was how the Sumerians kept track of everything from sheep inventories to epic poems about Gilgamesh, a king who was basically the Sumerian Chuck Norris. This invention was a game changer. Imagine trying to run a civilization on oral history alone. Wait, how many goats did we agree to trade for that chariot again? Chaos. Cuneiform was the key to the Sumerian success, and possibly the inspiration for the first Sumer clay tablet. With agriculture booming and writing in place, the Sumerians needed somewhere to hang their hats, or more likely, their reed sandals. And thus, cities were born. We're talking about places like Ur and Uruk, names that sound like they belong in a fantasy novel, but were very real and bustling metropolises. These cities weren't just a random collection of mud brick houses, though. They had massive ziggurats, which were basically giant temples that looked like pyramids designed by someone with a serious love for right angles. They had complex irrigation systems, because even 5,000 years ago, people knew the value of a lush, green lawn. And they had bustling marketplaces, where you could trade your extra barley for a new clay pot, or maybe even a pet donkey. The point is, these cities weren't just impressive for their time. They were straight-up marvels of urban planning, even if they did lack decent Wi-Fi. The Sumerians were incredibly innovative. They didn't just invent writing. They created a whole suite of systems and technologies that made their lives easier and their civilization more successful. It was like they were constantly having, "there's got to be a better way" moments, centuries before life hack videos took over the internet. Take irrigation, for example. They figured out how to harness the power of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers to create a complex system of canals and ditches that irrigated their crops. This meant more food, which meant more people, which meant more brains coming up with even more innovations. They were basically the original growth hackers. And speaking of growth, let's not forget trade. The Sumerians were masters of commerce. They traded with civilizations as far away as Egypt and India, exchanging their surplus grain and textiles for precious metals, gemstones, and probably the ancient equivalent of those Mesopotamia t-shirts. But let's be real, no society can function for long without a good set of rules. That's where their legal codes came in. They weren't exactly the Magna Carta, but they did establish laws, courts, and even prisons. So yes, even in ancient Mesopotamia, you couldn't just go around stealing your neighbor's donkey without consequences. Section 5. Climate change. Not just a 21st century problem. Now you might be thinking, these Sumerians sound pretty awesome. What went wrong? Well, here's the thing about building a civilization in the middle of a desert. Sometimes the environment has other plans. And in the case of the Sumerians, those plans involved a little thing called climate change. Yes, even 4,000 years ago, climate change was a thing. A long period of drought hit Mesopotamia, making it harder to grow crops. And when you're a civilization that relies heavily on agriculture, that's a bit of a problem. It's like trying to run a tech startup with no internet access. Not ideal. The drought led to food shortages, which led to social unrest, which probably led to a lot of very stressed out Sumerians. It's hard to be innovative and forward-thinking when you're worried about where your next meal is coming from. Section 6. The Amorites. They came, they saw, they conquered, and taxed. As if climate change wasn't enough, the Sumerians also had to deal with another problem: neighbors who were really into invading. And no group of invaders was more persistent than the Amorites. Now, the Amorites weren't exactly the most original thinkers. They saw the Sumerians with their fancy cities and their sophisticated systems and thought, hey, we want some of that. So, they did what any self-respecting group of nomads would do. They invaded. The Amorites weren't just content with conquering, though. They were also big fans of taxes. They imposed heavy taxes on the Sumerian cities, further draining their resources and weakening their ability to resist. It was like trying to run a business with the IRS constantly breathing down your neck. Section 7. Resource depletion. Even Mesopotamians knew peak oil. Remember all that irrigation the Sumerians were doing? Well, it turns out that even the most advanced irrigation systems can have unintended consequences. In the Sumerians' case, it led to a problem called salinization. Basically, all that irrigation water brought salt from deep underground to the surface. And salt, as any gardener will tell you, is not exactly a plant's best friend. Over time, the salt built up in the soil, making it less fertile and harder to grow crops. It was like the Mesopotamian version of overusing chemical fertilizers. This ecological disaster, combined with the ongoing drought and the pesky Amorites, put a serious strain on the Sumerian civilization. They were like a once thriving startup that had run out of funding, faced a PR nightmare, and was now being sued by a competitor. Not exactly a recipe for success. Section 8. The legacy of Sumer, gone but not forgotten. By around 2000 BCE, the Sumerian civilization had pretty much collapsed. Their once great cities were in ruins, their sophisticated systems had crumbled, and their land was struggling to support them. It was a slow, drawn-out decline, kind of like the end of a once popular sitcom that just kept going on for too long. But even though the Sumerians are long gone, their impact on the world is undeniable. They basically wrote the playbook for civilization, inventing writing, building cities, developing complex systems of governance, and even coming up with new forms of taxation. Thanks, Amorites. Their legacy lived on through the civilizations that followed, like the Babylonians, the Assyrians, and even the ancient Greeks and Romans. So, the next time you're writing a tweet, using irrigation to water your lawn, or grumbling about taxes, remember the Sumerians. They may be gone, but their influence is still felt today. Section 9. Lessons from Sumer, or how to avoid a Mesopotamian meltdown. The collapse of the Sumerian civilization wasn't exactly a happy ending, but it does offer some valuable lessons for us today. Think of it as a cautionary tale, but with fewer chariots and more Twitter. First, climate change is real, folks, and it's been a problem for a long time. The Sumerians learned that the hard way, and we'd be wise to heed their warning. Second, overexploiting resources is never a good idea. Whether it's salinating your soil or depleting your oil reserves, unsustainable practices will eventually catch up with you. And finally, never underestimate the power of a good tax collector. The Amorites may have been invaders, but they understood that controlling the purse strings is a surefire way to gain power. So the next time you see your tax bill, just be grateful you're not paying tribute to a bunch of nomadic warriors. Section 10. Sumerian civilization, a final thought. So, there you have it, the rise and fall of the Sumerian civilization. They were innovative, they were influential, and they ultimately fell victim to a combination of environmental challenges, external pressures, and maybe even a little bit of bad luck. Their story is a reminder that even the most advanced civilizations are vulnerable to collapse. But it's also a testament to the enduring power of human ingenuity. The Sumerians may be gone, but their legacy lives on, reminding us that even in the face of adversity, we humans are capable of incredible things. Now, If you'll excuse me, I'm going to go water my plants and hope I don't accidentally salinize my entire garden. That's all for tonight, folks.